Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Not Minding My Own Business. I'm Russell Farbiars, and I am thrilled to have with me today this week's featured guest, Heather Uczynski. Heather is a business psychologist based in the Berks County area. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you, Russell. It's a pleasure.
So, if you want to tell our listeners a little bit about you and your business.
Sure. I call myself a business psychologist because for 25 years I was a counseling psychologist. So psychology is certainly a big part of my training. But unlike many other clinical psychologists, I was always very interested in business. And one comment that I always got when I was doing counseling is, "Oh my gosh, Heather, you're the first person that actually gave me some practical advice." So that started me thinking about coaching. And that's sort of how I transitioned into coaching and now working with businesses.
Wonderful. Now, I'll tell our listeners, Heather was probably the first business coach I ever engaged. It was, I want to say 7 years ago, 8 years ago. And I was telling Heather before we got on that there are things that she said to me 7, 8 years ago that I still think about and I still use. So I think it was a good transition for you. But
Thank you.
what um what got you started um, i- in your business in the coaching aspect?
Well, honestly, for a while I did both counseling and coaching because it took a while to make that transition because a lot of business people don't want to hear about a lot of fluffy psychological stuff. So, I kind of had to get used to the business world, the business terminology, all that sort of thing, and to build my credibility in that sector.
And now, what you do is not just psychology. This is not like you don't have business leaders lying on the couch as
Oh
as
no,
the
no,
as the
no.
caricature goes.
No, no,
Um,
no, no.
so
It's
what?
you know what? I don't do I don't do counseling anymore. So the difference between coaching and counseling, in case that was your next question,
It was.
is that there is an overlap, but with coaching, there is always a connection to professional development.
And are there areas that you specialize in?
Yes, I I have done work in conflict resolution in the past. When a company has a conflict between employees or between an employee and a supervisor, and HR either doesn't want to get involved or hasn't been able to be real effective. That's where, with my very fine-tuned interpersonal skills, I can help in those situations and have. Um, I specialize really in helping executives to increase their emotional intelligence. And uh, shall I talk about what emotional intelligence is?
Heather, you're taking the questions right out of my mouth. I definitely, if you could talk a little bit about emotional intelligence, what it is, and how it can help executives to really understand that.
Yeah, in the past, executive emotional intelligence was really what was considered soft skills. And I don't like that terminology because I really prefer to think about that skill set as power skills. If you read anything about leadership these days, what is talked about a lot is how self awareness and empathy are so critical to leadership. And those are two components of emotional intelligence. First is self awareness, then there's self management or self control, social awareness, and relationship management. So those are the four main components of emotional intelligence.
Okay. And I know that you work with clients when they're hiring. So if you could talk a little bit about what your process is and how you help in hiring decisions.
Sure. So when I first got into my business, I was looking for an assessment to use. And so I found this assessment. It's called the Simmons Emotional Intelligence Profile. And I know you're familiar with that. And what I liked about it is it really gave me a lot of information about people. I use it in coaching as sort of a baseline that tells me, okay, where's this person now and where do they want to be? In hiring, I'm not a recruiter in any sense, but what I do is when an organization is looking to hire somebody specifically for a key position, um, what I do is ask them to come up with their top two or three candidates, and then I administer the Simmons Emotional Intelligence Profile, and then I review the results with the person who's doing the hiring, and I make recommendations based on those results. Sometimes it's go back and have another interview and focus on these key points, these key areas. Sometimes it's do you have any other candidates? Because these are not so good.
And Heather, I think one of your skills has always been the ability to very, very bluntly put it the way it is.
Well, it's a skill and it also gets me in trouble.
I'm sure your husband loves it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's tough being married to a psychologist, trust me.
Well, I'm married to a lawyer, so
Yeah, yeah. I know. I know, I know. Different challenges.
yes. So, what have been some of your biggest successes and biggest failures in your business?
Oh gosh. Well, in terms of successes, last year I finished up work with someone who um, was promoted into management really after I started working with her. And she really was a high potential person, but the problem was she was a little too abrasive, abrupt. Her emails were, a little sketchy, and so I worked with her, and then she was promoted, and then I was permitted to work with her during her transition, which was great. And wow, I mean, not only was she completely all in with coaching. She also began to take the things that she learned in coaching and sort of distribute that knowledge throughout her department and with her direct reports. And there's nothing that makes me happier than that. It was really a wonderful success story. And I should check into her with her and see if she was promoted again, because it wouldn't surprise me if she were. Very, very high potential person.
Mm.
And now that she has become more emotionally intelligent and has really, grasped the concepts and put them into action, um, she's just terrific.
So, how do you from a logistical perspective, you do the coaching. Is it all in person or do you do it over Zoom now? Or
Well, yeah, I mean, thank goodness for Zoom and the other platforms, because I wouldn't have been working for 2 years.
yeah.
So I'm very grateful, and trust me, I learned how to do it. I learned how to be proficient. I actually went to a mutual colleague of ours, Elise Minton, to help teach me how to be proficient in Zoom, which was really, really helpful. Um, so so that was good. Now, at the current time, I do some of both. To be
Mhm.
honest, I'm grateful for Zoom, but to me, I would much rather meet with people in person. Because you miss something when you're not in person.
It's it's not exactly the same.
It's not. It's
I'll
it's
give you
second
that.
best.
Yeah. Um, but it does open the door to working with people who aren't necessarily in your backyard, which can be nice.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm certainly thankful for it. It's so funny how we kind of ignored that whole area of working, and now it's so commonplace.
Yeah, yeah. So what were the some of the issues that you were working with your coachees on, as we were in the pandemic, and workplaces changed.
Yeah, one of the things I worked with people on was remote leadership. which, is a little bit more complicated than
Mhm.
when people are right there with you in the office. So that was certainly one issue. Um, Trying to think what else. Aspects of emotional intelligence, executive presence, um, conflict resolution, all those kinds of things are common issues that people need help with because have they gotten any training, on these things? Probably not.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of room for growth in those areas.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, the workplace has gone through a dramatic transition over the last 2 years. Do you think that transition is better for people or worse?
Well, in some ways, I think it's better because having had a mental health background, um, very concerned about people's emotional health during the pandemic. Honestly, I had a tough time with it. Being somewhat extroverted, it was. I don't like sitting in front of my computer all day. It's brutal for me, and so I had to work very hard to keep my emotions where I wanted them. To stay positive and optimistic. And so I think that a lot of leaders became more aware of their employees' emotional health. And I think that's a very good thing. Um, One thing that I would always recommend to people, during that time when we were in lockdown, was to just ask people how they're doing.
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. I remember there came to a point when I realized with my employees that we needed to start having, regular meetings, really not so much not just for business purposes, but really just as a how are you doing? What's working, and we started doing that weekly for a while just when we were all in lockdown. We now do it monthly, but one of the things I try to get from my employees is, what's going well for you, what's not going well, a personal win, a business win, just trying to be, I don't even know
Trying to
how to
connect really is
y-
what you're
y-
saying. Because you know
yeah,
what, Russell, I mean, one thing that I think people give short shrift to is how important the social aspect of work is.
right.
As someone who's worked at home for the past like 10, 11 years, I can tell you that I have to take extra effort to connect with people via networking, via going out to lunch or coffee or whatever, just so that I can get those needs met because they are taken very much for granted.
You don't realize it, till you're not doing it anymore
Absolutely.
because I've been working at home now since March of 2020, and I
Oh,
still
you're still not back.
our office is back. I have chosen to remain remote for most of the week. I go to the office maybe one day a week.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So it's definitely it's definitely different, but I know when I go to the office, it sometimes is a little bit more social, um, you know, chatting um, with the people
Yeah.
who
How are
work
you
there.
doing? What are the updates? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then part of our meetings, I have employees who are remote, who are 100% remote. So we don't see them in person. So then it's good to sort of connect with them as well. It's just the last 2 years has sort of opened up a lot of different employment opportunities. I would say.
It's interesting because from what I'm hearing, when people apply for a job these days,
Mhm.
if it can possibly happen, they're looking for at least a hybrid
Yep.
situation.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I've seen. When I've posted positions lately, I sometimes I'll post if I need something in person, I'll post it as an in person, but then I'll also post it as remote. And I can tell you that the number of applications I get for remote far exceed what I get for in person because I think that a lot of employees have learned about flexibility through the pandemic because they
Amen.
had
Yep.
had to work from home, and
Mhm.
they don't want to give it up. And
Absolutely. And I
you
don't
know,
blame them because
yeah,
I appreciate working from home too. It's great.
right. I'm right there with you. And all of my in-person employees have the opportunity to work from home when they need to, because you know there's no reason not to let them do it.
If it
They
can be worked out, sure.
Yeah, there's no reason. But I have you worked with a lot of employers who are transitioning to using remote workers or hybrid environments, and do you have any tips on how to structure that?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, I was actually working with companies that already had remote employees just because of the distance, the
Right,
different locations and so forth. And I think that, again, it's really important to remember your remote employees. Like, for instance, let's say you're a corporation and you're giving out swag, company swag to your employees. Well, don't forget your remote employees. Don't forget to give them and their family members some of that swag too.
right.
Um, the water cooler talk is a real thing and is something that is missed by people who are remote. And you can't assume that your direct reports or that your colleagues know something that you found out just through the grapevine or whatever, and they have no clue about it. So you have to keep them in the loop and work hard to do that.
Yeah, it involves more intentional communication.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Heather, what are some things about what you do that people should be aware of that they aren't otherwise aware of?
Well, one thing, Russell, is that I used to just take on sort of long-term coaching assignments, which, to change behavior, it doesn't happen immediately.
Mhm.
So my cat may be in the picture here. She's moving around here, so I
Oh, there's a
apologize.
tail.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So one of the benefits of Zoom, I guess.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so I used to do, maybe 3 months, 6 months, a year long-term projects. But now I'm offering really short-term coaching that may be like 1 or 2 sessions. And the kinds of things that people take advantage of that for are things like preparing for a conversation with one's boss, um, kind of beefing up your emotional intelligence a little bit, dealing with a conflict with a colleague or even a supervisor. Um, Presentation skills, those kinds of things that, I can help with in really, 1 or 2 sessions. So that's something new for me. I really hadn't done that before, and people seem to like it.
I could see that being very helpful, you know,
Yeah.
for those sort of one-off things that people need to prepare for.
And I also do a weekly, it's called a management minute that I post on LinkedIn. And
Hmm.
whenever I post one about conflict resolution, people seem to view it. And I think the reason for that is, and you know this as
Hmm.
being a leader, that that is such a huge part of management that gets totally ignored in terms of any preparation. Um, Actually, 18% of a manager's time is spent in dealing with interpersonal conflicts, which amounts to about 1 day a week, which is a huge amount of time. And people, most people don't like conflict. I don't particularly like it, but I've learned that there are ways of handling it that can actually produce a pretty good outcome, and that it's not really as scary as people make it.
Hmm.
So that's something that I definitely can help people with.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And sometimes it I think the intentionality also goes a long way in thinking through how you're going to talk with someone. Um,
Absolutely. You should
yeah,
always plan for those conversations and think about them, how you want to say what you're going to say. Um, not to memorize anything, of course, but just to
right.
really be thoughtful And another thing, to just get in the right space before you have those conversations, that what your intent is to help that person. And even
Right.
if you're helping them by terminating them from a job that they don't like and they don't fit in with, you can certainly do it in a humane, caring way.
Right. And I think and maybe this is us, it might be an unpopular opinion to some other people, but I think that sometimes when you terminate someone from a position, you're doing them a favor.
Oh, absolutely. Because do you really think if they're not doing a good job that they're happy? I highly doubt it.
Yeah, most people know that it's not a fit, but they don't. It's hard to make the decision to move on. And a lot of times when you let someone go, they have this huge sigh of relief afterwards because now they don't have that stress eating at them.
Absolutely. And especially if you do it in a caring, humane way. And you know that when you're a boss and also a nice person, it's very hard to terminate people
Mhm.
because you know that their life is being affected and even people in their family are being affected. So if you have any empathy at all, it's a very difficult thing to do. And most managers wait too long to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard the phrase hire fast, fire faster.
Well, I would say hire slow and fire fast.
I've also heard that one.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
because
the
you know
the con
you need to make sure the person's a good fit.
yeah, the conventional wisdom was hire slow, fire fast, but in this job market, it's become hire fast, fire faster
Yeah,
because
that's true, because if you don't, then the person's gonna be gone. That
right.
makes sense, Russell. Yeah.
So Heather, let's talk a little bit about you. Are you originally from the Berks County area?
I am. I am. I grew up in Exeter Township, and I actually grew up on 40 acres of land.
Oh wow.
And it was kind of a farm. It wasn't a real farm, but we did have some animals. And this is, I think, an interesting part of my childhood is that my father wanted to have a pond or a lake on our property. And he consulted engineers, and I guess he didn't like what they had to say. So he actually built this pond, which we called it a large pond or a small lake. It was pretty big. And so after that was built, and the strange thing about it is it had trees in it because my dad didn't take the trees out. So the
Oh,
trees were actually in the lake. But it was wonderful because we I learned to ice skate very, very young. And we had like a hill, then the lake, and another small hill. So we could sled and toboggan across that. And like all the neighborhood kids would come over, the boys would play hockey, all that kind of stuff. So it was really fun.
oh, that's wonderful. That's a wonderful memory.
It is.
Um,
It is.
yeah. And so the other things about you, what do you spend your time on when you're not working?
I love amateur photography. Particularly, I'm a nut for flowers. You may see some remnants of orchids in my sunroom here, which is where I have my office. I love to
Mhm.
take pictures of orchids, and I love to garden. I'm not much on vegetables, but flowers for me are just a wonderful way to just get in touch with nature and get out in the sunshine and the dirt and all that. So those are two things that I really enjoy. Plus reading. I like to read for professional reasons, but also I enjoy fiction quite a bit.
What's the best professional book you've read lately?
Well, it's a series of books, actually. Patrick Lencioni is an author that I love. He's written many books, and I would recommend really any of them.
Okay.
So, and also in terms of podcasts, he has an excellent podcast which is called The Table Group. I think you'd
Okay.
love it. It covers many, many topics. And what I like about Lencioni is just like Brene Brown, which is another author that I enjoy. He is a fan of um, leaders allowing themselves to be vulnerable,
Hmm.
which is tough to do sometimes because it's not comfortable, but it builds trust and it's really important.
It absolutely is. I completely agree. I'll have to check out that podcast because I'm I'm a sucker for a good business podcast.
Oh yeah, and I'll tell you what, his are great. I think please
Mhm.
let me know if you do listen and if you enjoy them because I think they're fantastic.
Well, yeah, I will definitely check that out. Now, I know, Heather, that you contribute back to our community on a regular basis. What what is the organization or organizations that you work the most with these days?
Well, right now, uh, I'm involved with a group called Berks Women in Motion, and it's a
Okay.
networking group, but we also do things for the community. And I've been going to Opportunity House on a regular basis and helping to and prepare lunch and um, give lunch to the people who live there. And it's a very humbling and good experience. So that I really enjoy.
Wonderful, wonderful. And are you still active with the Northeast Berks Chamber of Commerce?
Actually, no, I got involved with another chamber, which is
Oh,
the Northern Lancaster Chamber of Commerce.
okay.
And I love it. It's a very, very active chamber. In fact, after we're finished here, I'll be going to a luncheon in Ephrata. So I enjoyed the Northeast Chamber. I met wonderful people there and I got a lot out of it. But I kind of feel like it's time to, try another area. And
Yeah.
so that's why I got involved with the Northern Lancaster Chamber.
So Northern Lancaster, so that's is that the Ephrata area?
Ephrata, Adamstown,
Oh, okay.
it does go into Lidditz and,
Yeah.
some of the areas closer to Lancaster proper. But yeah, it's great organization. I highly recommend it.
Well, wonderful. Well, Heather, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom with our listeners. And to our listeners, thank you again for tuning in to Not Minding My Own Business.
Thank you, Russell. It's been my pleasure.